Mr. Gustafson, please bring forth your first witness. Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it is my privilege to be here before you today to present my client for your consideration. We will be focusing on one aspect of my client so that you can see with your own eyes the merits and flaws of my character so that you can determine for yourself if you would also like to consider my client for your own interests. My client will serve as the first witness. If you prefer, a witness of character. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Rob, your favorite character lawyer here, and today is going to be a fun one. We are going to make a character for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, commonly called the First Edition. It is a sea change from the original Dungeons & Dragons, which was a much simpler game system that was still fairly closely tied in with the wargaming, especially the chainmail war games that TSR developed and came out with. As a matter of fact, that was required to play the game is to have the chainmail rules as reference for how the combat worked. This one moved away from that completely, introducing characters and a focus on role play and just a lot of elements that really evolved gaming and Dungeons & Dragons line in particular. We started to see such familiar faces as assassins and monks and even a very first rendition of the Bard, specialist classes, the illusionist for wizards, the paladin, and this really did give players a world of different opportunities on how to play characters or what kind of characters they could imagine and then play. So, with that, we are going to make out the character. Again, I am going to use the first model of dice rolling from the Dungeon Master's Guide because the mechanism that you use for rolling dice was not included in the player's handbook. The Game Master's Guide was what gave you that, the Dungeon Master's Guide. We're going to be using option 1, although we'll be discussing the other options available. And we will go into this without having any preconceived idea of what our character is going to be. We'll let the dice determine what we will play, and we will run the stats in order unless it creates something that just doesn't work for one reason or the other. It should be interesting and exciting, so looking forward to that. So, please join me. All right, here we are. For those of you who haven't used First Edition before, looking through one of these books would be kind of, it's stepping into another world from modern game manuals. The focus was on data, raw data, everything printed on straight pages. There is some art, enough to add a little, decoration and color, but for the most part, this was an info dump. Lots and lots of information crammed into the Dungeon Master's Guide. For those of us who are more used to earlier books, some of the newer books, sometimes you just look at all of the extra art and think, well, that's information that I could be having, whereas something like this is very, very dense. Everything serves to bring new information and details to the game. Now, First Edition, what I'm just going to call AD&D from now on, really had a focus on requiring primarily the two books, the Player's Handbook here and the Dungeon Master's Guide. You needed both books in order to play. You could probably get away with just having the screen for the reference tables and things, but if you only had the Player's Handbook, you would have some pretty tough sledding to actually run the game. It was sufficient for the player, but you'd still need a game master who had everything. So, including the rules for rolling out your character. Now, they give 4 different methods here, which I'm going to go over. The first method, which has survived through the various editions, all scores are recorded and arranged in the order the player desires. 4d6 are rolled, and the lowest die, or one of the lower, is discarded. The reason for this, rather than just the straight 3d6 that we used in Basic and Original, is that your characters are designed to be heroic. This is definitely an effort to make sure that the bell curve is raised a bit. They actually even show the bell curve for rolling three six-sided dice, which at its peak runs right at the 10.5 mark. And if you are going to go with 46, it shifts. And the discussion on that was so much so that they felt that they wanted to show the bell curve and how that works, which is fine for a mental exercise. But as far as we're concerned, 46 drop the low will give us a nice range of ability. Still the possibility of rolling a low attribute, but generally our average should be somewhere between 11 to 12. Hoping for more. Method 2, all scores are recorded and arranged as in Method 1, but you roll 3d6 12 times, and the highest 6 scores are retained. So that means if you roll a really low roll, you can get rid of that. You want just the highest 6. This, again, is still going on with the competitive nature of Dungeons & Dragons, however. You're not celebrating low rolls as a character interest point to, make your character. It's not about the dump stats. It's about trying to have high stats across the board. Method 3, scores rolled are according to each ability category in order: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma. 3d6 are rolled 6 times for each ability, and the highest score in each category is retained for that category. So, again, this one is going to attempt to give you lots and lots of chances at a high roll, and practically obliviates the possibility of having a really low score. Anything under average is rather unlikely with 6 tries. The bell curve makes sure of that. However, unlike Method 1, the 46 drop the low, the very highest scores are still not very likely. You're not going to see a lot of 18s with this. Your higher scores are probably going to be the 15s, 14s, 15s, maybe 16s. Of course, there's always a possibility. And then we have Method 4. 3d6 are rolled sufficient times to generate the 6 ability scores in order for 12 characters. The player then selects the single set of scores which he or she finds the most desirable, and these scores are noted on the character sheet. So basically you're going to roll up 12 different characters with 3d6 drop, just straight 3d6, and in order. So it's going to be kind of using the same system that we used for Basic and OD&D with those character witnesses. Please look them up if you don't remember them. And you're going to do this 12 times and take the best of 12. This means that your character will probably have a high score in what you're interested in, but you are at the whim of the dice for whatever else you have. This will allow you to preserve having low dice rolls, so that becomes not only possible, but also very likely. It also generates the incidence of what are considered dump stats, where you don't care as much if you have low scores in the attributes you don't care about, as long as your ones you want are high. So in all of these possibilities, it gives you much greater leeway on what you're going to play. Remember when we did Basic Dungeons & Dragons, we ended up rolling up, I still think fairly strongly, the decision for a halfling was the right one. In this case, you will be able to have a great amount of latitude on the scores of the attributes that you care about. Therefore, you have a good chance of playing what you want to play rather than just what the dice give you. So that's quite a bit of a change in terms of approach. Now, many of these options, I don't doubt, sprang out of house rules. Some people found that when the dice were rolled and they rolled a high intelligence, but very mediocre, or maybe if they rolled an 18, but they wanted to play a fighter and weren't able to get that in the strength, that their game master would allow them to move it over to that or put the scores where they wanted to. These house rules are an evolution of years of gameplay under original Dungeons & Dragons, evolving them and adapting them, again, undoubtedly from lots and lots of other people and how they wanted to play. So that in itself is kind of interesting. We're going to be using method 1 here, rolling 46, drop the low, and we'll see what that gives us. I have my own kind of mechanism for deciding what I'm going to play, so I'm going to treat this as if I'm rolling up a new character for a new campaign. And as you well know, I love making characters. So we have strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. And we've got 4 6-sided dice right here. So let's see what we can do. Our first, not looking good. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for our first stat. Okay, well, we have a dump stat. They were all going to be 18s. Oh my goodness. That's a 3, 2, 1 with another one. That's a 6. Right now we're looking profession torchbearer is looking good. Can still be turned around though. Here we have a 6, a 4, and a 2 for a 12, dropping the low. So we have a 12. Moving up to average. And then we have a 5, a 5, and a 4 for a 14. Again, not a superhero, but it's definitely uptrending. And then we have a 5, a 3, and a 3 for an 11, dropping the 1. And then we have a 5, and a 4, with dropping the 2 for another 14. Okay, so our scores are 14, 14, 12, 11, 7, 6. All right, well, these aren't fantastic stats, no doubt about it. I don't have anything that makes me, really excited about this character as far as being a superhero. But as far as being a solid role in a game and being able to contribute to a group, this can be done. So, we'll crack open the player's handbook and take a look. Now, my personal approach, and this is purely personal, is if I have rolled my statistics and I find that I have one good attribute, but only one, the rest is mediocre to poor, I generally choose to play a wizard, putting that high attribute in my intelligence. If I roll 2 good scores, or at least 2 solid scores and the rest mediocre with maybe a poor stat or 2, I will generally play a cleric, putting one of the high stats into my wisdom. If I roll 3 high scores, I then start thinking about a rogue, especially if one of the stats is really high to make it a no-brainer to put it into your dexterity. If I roll 4 good scores, then I think fighter, especially if one of them is really high in AD&D. You love the idea of getting that 18 strength. But here we are, we've got 2 decent stats, 2 average stats, and 2 lower stats. So I'm going to start thinking cleric. Nothing too terrible there. So, if I think about playing the cleric, oh, I just happen to be open to the cleric. What do you know? I would start out with a spell that I can cast, the ability to wear any armor that I can come across, a limitation on weapons, but still being able to fight. It would give me the recommendation of strength and constitution as secondary statistics, and decent dexterity, not bad either for not getting hit. I will think about that. Okay. If I have that high of a stat, we can look at the attribute tables themselves. And this is my order of thinking. A 14 strength does nothing really. It gives me a little extra weight allowance, no real bonus on open doors. Even a fair weakling can do the same as I can, even if I pick the best that I rolled. And a Ben Bar's gift gates, yeah. Now, another thing I can look at is race. Unlike basic Dungeons & Dragons, choosing race gives you a direct bonus to your attribute, rather than just having to qualify for it. It gives you some abilities. However, like in basic Dungeons & Dragons, it also gives you limitations on how far you can advance in many of the classes. And also, cleric is not an option for most of the other races. Humans alone can be any race they want, or can be any class they want, and level up as much as they want. A half-orc could get up to a 4th level cleric, which is not inconsequential. But yes, they can also be fighters. So a fighter cleric? I don't know if they can be a fighter cleric. Let me take a look. Probably not. Half-elves can be clerics up to 5th level. All the other races can only have cleric levels as NPCs. So, yeah, I'm probably going to be human if we're going to stay as a cleric. I could be a wizard and end up putting that 14 in, say, dexterity to try to avoid being hit or to help if I'm going to fling daggers and the like. 14 doesn't really excite me. If I had a higher stat, like a 16 or a 17 or an 18, that would really make that decision easy. But a 14 means that I would probably be most well received as a support class, like a cleric. This is just a matter of personal preference, of course. There's no reason why I couldn't make this a fighter if I wanted to be in the front line. I would be able to have 14 strength, which would give me no bonuses. Say a 14 constitution, which, looking at the table, I think would give me maybe an extra hit point per level, which would be nice. 14 intelligence would be the minimum intelligence for use of 7th level spells, so that's plenty powerful for a wizard. Extra languages, 14, 55% chance of learning spells, minimum of 6 spells per level, and a maximum of 9 spells per level. I like to have a greater range than that. As far as the number of spells I can learn, I don't like that limitation myself. So, as far as a wisdom of 14, maximum wisdom for a half-orc character, yay. No real penalties there. No bonuses to my saving throws, but no penalties. 14 would give me a bonus. 2 first level spells as a bonus. So even though the net score isn't really high, I still get a substantial bonus there. I'd be able to cast 3 spells out of the gate as a cleric. That's really solidly in the wheelhouse for what you want at first level, being able to help as much as possible. A 14 dexterity would give no penalties, but no bonuses. You really have to have a high dexterity to get a significant bonus. Likewise, there would be no bonus if I decided I wanted to be a thief, as far as any of the skills for that attribute, so no, not really. And a 14 does not give a bonus to hit points either. So there's that. 14 for charisma, if I choose to not use my charisma as a dump stat, would give me a maximum of 6 henchmen, loyalty base of 5%, reaction adjustment of 10%, which isn't terrible. I mean, I'd be good with people. But looking at the possibility of the race, if anybody is scandalized by the fact that this one is written all over, I didn't do that. This is a play copy from someone else, and it's still very legible. So, as far as the races that I would have a choice of, though, as far as dwarves, getting the infravision and other fun stuff is solid. Bonus against commonly fought monsters. Bonus to saving throws versus spells is certainly nice. They can be fighters, thieves, or assassins, though. And they could be fighter thieves. Not my thing, especially since my dexterity isn't very high and my strength isn't really high. So, not something I would consider personally. Exceptional strength, resistance. Yeah, resistance to those bonuses to saving throws have saved numerous dwarf characters in my experience. So the detection abilities are kind of nice, especially if you don't have bonuses. If you don't have thieves to find things for you, and adding a bonus to hit commonly fought monsters and a bonus to armor class against giants who can hurt you badly. Yeah, that's not bad. A bonus of +1 to Constitution and a -1 to Charisma. I could get a Constitution of up to 15, which would give me a +1 hit point. So as far as if I'm shopping for a race, there are some advantages to dwarves that would make it a little tougher to say no to. I could make a fairly solid, I would say, fighter. Wouldn't have any real bonuses or stand out a lot, though. I'd just do the best I could and try hard to help out the group. As far as elves go, elves can be fighters, magic users, thieves, or assassins. They can multi-class all over the place. Resistance to sleep, bonuses to hit with bows and swords. Languages, the ability to infrared, finding secret doors is wonderful. Every group probably should have an elf if you can. But a +1 to dexterity and a -1 to constitution. Since our numbers are kind of floating, the +1 to dexterity would put us up to the cellar level of where I'd start to get excited about being a thief. And elves do get some advantages to thieving skills, the detecting and finding and stuff. But still not enough to really get me excited. Gnomes can be fighters, illusionists, or thieves, or assassins. Again, they have some of the abilities of dwarves, but again, not really going there. Half elves, some of the lesser abilities of elves, the limitations on them also are somewhat less than elves have, including the ability to play as clerics, the ability to be a little bit higher level assassins, chance of being rangers. You can be a half-elven ranger, or a little bit higher level fighter than elves can. But yeah, we're not going to be a half-elf. Halflings, again, halflings are really good if you're thinking about being a thief. They're brilliant at it. Not so much for the other races. There are just some limitations for that that they don't have. Their bonus to dexterity is nice. Their -1 to strength, considering I can fluidly put the attributes where I want, and a -1 to, say, an 11 really is no penalty to speak of. I could get myself up to a dexterity of a 15, which isn't terrible. And their limitations are likewise not, they can be unlimited level in thief. So if I really wanted to do that thief thing, I could. But they can only be up to a 6th level in a fighter, up to 6th level of a druid. Again, this is assuming that you're using this. I know some people just threw out the class level limitations of races, but we're playing by the rules here. So ultimately, I think I'm just going to be a human cleric. I've always liked clerics because I think as far as roleplay stance, you've got the twin demands of your adventuring life and your companions, but you also have the demands of your religious life. So if you find a vocation that interests you, playing within the world gives you another role within your role as an adventurer. It also gives you a role as a religious person, which can have some pretty rewarding roleplay options. So, if we're going to be a cleric, none of the basic races give you any bonus to wisdom. And again, we're just playing with the player's handbook. I know there are other races that are out there for first edition. I know that there's other books that they came out with. I do have several of them, including Oriental Adventures and Unearthed Arcana. We're just using the player's handbook as is the custom for this. Perhaps in another episode we'll take a look at other options, but for this we're just going to go with the main player's handbook. We're going to go with a 14 in our wisdom. And the other 14, we're going to be an adventuring cleric. I'm going to put that into my constitution. because you never know, you might come up across some nastiness that you may want to have to try to weather. It's not going to give a bonus to our saving throws or anything, but it's still good to know. The other flip side of that is figuring out where we're going to put our low statistics. A 6 in particular does give a penalty to almost everything. If we are going to risk being up in the front line, we probably don't want our dexterity to be savaged like that. But there are relatively few bonuses for being an intelligent cleric. Believe it if you will. There aren't a lot of drawbacks. So if we're going to be a country bumpkin cleric who's never been properly educated and he's got a lot more faith than he has brains, we're going to give him the 6 in the intelligence, and also being rather coarse and rough. Charisma is going to be a dump stat too with a 7. We have 2 low stats we have to acknowledge. So in this, our character is not going to be very socially comfortable, and he's not going to have the words to say nice things either. As far as role-playing goes, he's going to have the wisdom to realize that he's probably not the person who should be talking to people, but sometimes he won't be able to help himself with those numbers. Which then gives us the 11 and the 12 to dish out between strength and dexterity. We can put the 12 in the strength and the 11 into the dexterity. Alright, now that we have those numbers, we can write those down. Now, I am going to write in pencil because in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, one of the first things in the Dungeon Master's Handbook talks about applying wishes to improve your attributes. There are also magical items that can improve your attributes, like the different tomes that can adjust your stats. So we're going to put this in pencil. I usually do most of the things on a character sheet in pencil. Sometimes I just do pen for dramatic purposes, but strength of 12, intelligence of 6, wisdom of 14, dexterity of 11, constitution of 14, and a charisma of 7. Alright, so that gives us our numbers. We will then be able to fill that in, all of the fun stuff. So, each of your attributes gives you several abilities. We can also fill in that we are a cleric. And we are level 1. Character name, brother. We'll go with Adolphus. Adolphus. Brother Adolphus. There we go. Freshly minted cleric. With his 3 spells, that'll give me a couple spells for healing and maybe a buffing spell, so I've got some range. So, with a 12 strength, we have no bonus to hit. We can't power through people's defenses with that average strength. Likewise, we don't do any extra damage with a hand-to-hand weapon when we smash somebody with it. Our weight adjustment with a 12 is plus 100 coin weight. So that's some extra poundage that we can carry around, which may be good if we get some good armor. Open doors on a 1 to 2. You roll a 6-sided die to find out if you open a stuck door. As most doors in dungeons are wet and soggy, they get stuck easily. So that is a commonly used roll. So I have a 2 in 6 chance, or 1 out of 3 chance. And for a 12, our bend bars lift gates roll is a 4%. The chances of doing some superhuman daring do. So 4%. Okay, so next we have our intelligence of a 6. Intelligence 6, minimum intelligence for a halfling. Yay! If I'd had a 5 intelligence here or lower, the character can only be a fighter. Ouch. I don't think there's a limitation for clerics, so my 6 intelligence gives me no possible number of additional languages. I can barely speak common, and even then I probably mumble my way through things. No extra abilities for magic users. My character will never multi-class into a magic user, or dual class. Wisdom of a 14. Maximum wisdom for a half-orc cleric. The minimum wisdom for a cleric would be a 9. I have a 14, which is better than that. No magical attack adjustment, so that really wouldn't help me there. 14 gives me 2 spell bonus. 2 first level spells. We don't have any of those other things to apply. Percent chance of spell failure. 14, that's 0%, which is good. You don't want your spells to... You have enough difficulties in AD&D surviving. You don't need your spells to fail on you. Okay, dexterity of 11. No bonus, no penalty. No reaction adjustment for initiative. No penalties to missile fire or defense adjustment. That's unfortunate. Getting hit is not ever going to be fun. Our character is not going to be eager to get into the front lines. He's not going to be dancing through combat anytime soon. But if he gets some good armor, he could, it can help his survivability. A lot of that may also determine, when we roll our hit points to see how we do there. A 14 Constitution. 14 Constitution, no bonus. We knew that already, although we're close. A 15 would have given us a +1 hit point per level. An 88% chance of system shock survival. 88. And a 92% chance of resurrection survival, which we have not been resurrected at all. So if we die and we have to come back, we have a pretty good odds of making it back. Failing that roll means you're dead forever, so that's not a bad thing for an adventurer to have. And then finally, our charisma of 7. Okay, don't have any minimums there to worry about. Charisma is a 5 or lower charisma. Here or lower, the character can only be an assassin. Nice. Rough part would be if you had a charisma and a strength of 5 or lower, because then you can only be an assassin, or you can only be a fighter, but not both. So you couldn't be an adventurer. You're just too weak and too dumb. Okay, so as far as character class limitations, don't worry about that. So for our 7, we have a maximum number of henchmen of 3. We can't employ a large party to go down to the dungeon with us. Their loyalty base is -10%. So I can't count on my people. And my reaction modifier is a -5%. Not too drastic. This might become an issue, but for the most part I would probably want other people to hire the hirelings more so than me. Alright, so that was fun. And we're going to be human with all that goes with it. No bonuses, no penalties, we're just awesome humans. The art for the different character races is cute. The dwarf, elf, half-elf, half-orc, human. The gnomes aren't in the party, nor halflings in this picture, so it's all good. Okay, as a cleric. Now, one of the fun things with this character sheet that I got from the Mad Irishman website is that it's got something for everybody. It's got a whole page dedicated to spells in your spell books. We're not doing that. We don't have any of that stuff. Weapons and armor, magic items, treasure, properties owned, animal companions, and other professions. It's got a ton of stuff here. Highlights of characters' life and previous adventures. That's awesome. I love this stuff. Last will and testament. That's cute. Titles granted or crimes accused of. Character traits. There's really good stuff in some of these classic character sheets. However, for the purposes of what we're doing here, this is not going to be used. Family symbol, sign, or blazon. Character sketch. Business symbol, sign, or blazon. We're not doing all of that. I'm not that artistically inclined. Parentage, brief family history, family allies. These are things that are, again, a sea change in difference of getting you invested in these characters. I know for a lot of people these are optional, and in some character sheets they don't exist at all. But this is something that was pretty much unthinkable in earlier editions, and just kind of expanded out to where your backstory is important and may have bearing within the overall story itself. Even if you're doing a series of modules that are not interconnected, these are the building blocks of your character's personality and can provide useful references to go back to determine, well, how is my character, who is not me, how would they approach a particular situation, or what experiences might they have drawn upon. And we have relations and followers here, nice big section, locales frequented, residences. It's a really, really nice character sheet. However, as is appropriate, all of the most important parts are right here on the front, so you don't have to go flipping through it all over the place. So we will have that for first level. We get 3 first level spells, which is really good. The nice thing about playing a spellcaster is that your stats don't really matter in D&D. You either can cast it or you can't. And when you cast it, it's used, so you have to be smart about how you budget which spells you're going to cast, be smart about the spells you select. And with clerics, you don't have to run around adding spells to a spell book. You just choose the spells out of your list that you can take. All in all, clerics are fine to play if your group is one that, gets some role-playing in, so you can take advantage of the fact that you have a tie to, your religion, sometimes influence because of it. And if they don't just expect you to be the healing battery all the time, it can give you some versatility. My very first character was a cleric that I played in AD&D. I didn't have a nice character sheet like this. It was actually something that was made on loose leaf paper for me by the other players, but it was still very cool. And yeah, so this is fine. So let us see. Delve into this a little bit more. Vision is normal. Resistances are none. Psionics. I'm going to get my heart broken again. I've never, ever... Nope, I take it back. I did one time roll up a psionic character. And this is an optional thing. And again, know that there are plenty of groups that don't use the psionics, even if they do still play first edition. But we're going to do it because it's an option. So, characters with 1 or more unmodified intelligence, wisdom, or charisma scores of 16 or higher might have... Okay, never mind. I don't have it. I thought because I was a cleric I might, but yeah, that 14 isn't enough. Only really exceptional characters get it. So that does widen the gap between the haves and have-nots playing this game a little bit. So, 1 first level spell plus 2, and... Looking through the cleric, high ability scores and strength or dexterity. Okay, we've got that. The class bears a certain resemblance to religious orders of knighthood of medieval times. They use an 8-sided die per level to figure out hit points, which we have 6. Yay! That's not bad. I can take a dagger shot. Hit points of 6. The one downside is that this part wasn't edited the best. The hit points were doubled, and that was unfortunate. But yeah, we'll deal with it. The armor class should be here. The hit points should be here. Any other adjustment? Yeah, that's the only downside to this. This is a little confused and wasn't done quite right, but that's fine. Study of the usable spells usable. They are mostly for healing and buffing, usually either before or after the battle, not so much during. Also, I would choose how my playing style is going to be because my character doesn't have great strength, great dexterity. The makeup of the group is going to determine how I play my character appropriately. If we have a solid front line, my character would say, I will chip in from the flanks and try to help eliminate enemies a little bit quicker, but for the most part, I'm not going to expose myself to a great amount of danger. I might throw my initial spell against a particularly tough enemy, which would probably be a blast spell. And then at the end, I would probably reserve 2 Cure Light Wound spells to patch up those who got hurt in the fight. That would be my optimal combat routine for this particular character. So got those spells. In addition, the cleric has the ability to wear armor, carry effective weaponry, and engage in hand-to-hand combat with a reasonable chance of success. And we can turn undead, yay, which is determined on a table, so there's not a lot for me to have to write down at this point. I would just basically look at my level, roll, and apply the results against various undead. It would also work against demons and devils, which is good to remember because those kind of nasties are thick in the dungeon sometimes. And of course, those tables are in the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Handbook, not here. They employ a fair number of magical items, yay. They attract followers, yay. Not a lot, not that charisma. At 9th level, they can build a religious stronghold if you get very, very lucky and have enough money to do so. So that's what I have. All this extra stuff is not going to be here on this sheet. It would be available for the Game Master upon request, most often calling for me to roll things. Weapons are also going to be limited. I think we can only use blunt weapons in this version. Limited number of attack spells. Spoken read loud. Why am I not? That could be of any alignment, neutral, depending on the deity. Likewise, forbidden to use. There we go. Forbidden to use edged or pointed weapons that shed blood. Clerics have to have. Okay, so that's basically that. Not a lot of powers and abilities that are there in the book for us. So that is basically the decisions that we've had to make at this point. And for the most part, everything that we needed to write down. Alignment. A lot of this would depend on who we were going to play. In this place, we're going to assume that we're going to play in my favorite default world, which is Greyhawk. For fun, alignment-wise, we will say that my alignment will be Cat Good. A certain amount of freedom, but generally we're on the side of fighting off the evil. Patron deity. I think for fun, this one I'd like to follow Tretherion, who is also Cat Good. Tretherion is the deity of rebels, freedom fighters, people who fight oppression. So he's also Cat Good. He or she, can't remember. Anyhow, a favorite of mine for adventurers, honestly. And Religion of Tretherion. And the Oerthian Pantheon. Generally, there's several different cultures on Oerth. I would probably, if I was going to do some back work on this, I would probably choose which deities that I'm familiar with I would exclude, which ones I fight against, like Nirul, god of death, generally a good villain god. Race is human. Place of origin would depend on where the Dungeon Master wants to put the session. So, players me. Psionics, nil, sadly. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, no disciplines. Detection, normal. Languages, common. Common is interesting. It's the same logic for a language that most books have. Your characters can speak to any other character because it's important that you can communicate with other people. If you can't, it's usually pointedly, brought out that they speak a different language and their tongue is a mishmash to you. But in this case, common is kind of the catch-all language that civilized races carry. In my game world, there is no common tongue. There are just some that are more common than others, but yeah. Alright, so we got that part done. Yay! Equipping the character. Cleric gets an initial number of weapons too, and they have to be blunt. So weapons of proficiency, we would take the Footman's Mace, nice big heavy bludgeoning object. And the Morning Star sounds like it would be a cleric weapon. Includes the Gotentag or the Holy Water Sprinkler, but it's actually a spiky club, so it's got spikes on it. I don't think that's going to fly. We could pick the basic club, so anywhere we go, you can always find a club somewhere. So for overall utility, that could be useful. Even though our dexterity is not sensational, though, I would like to have something at range, and we can always use a sling to hit things out of combat. If I'm not rushing into combat, I still want to be able to help, so we will take the sling. You can get throwing hammers and things too, but yeah, the sling is fine. So that'll do. That's my 2 weapon proficiencies. Non-weapon proficiencies, or non-proficiency penalty is a -3 to hit. We don't want that. Every 4 levels you get another added proficiency, so yeah, that'll do. That'll do just fine. Alright. Hirelings and henchmen. Yes. Spells. We should do our spells. Looking at the spells. We have 12. Bless, Command. Okay, Bless is a general bonus to your group, a buff that helps them in combat. Command is a spell that can cripple one person for 1 round, making them do whatever you tell them. No saving throw, but it only works on creatures that can understand your tongue. So there are some creatures that would just be useless against. Create Water, wonderful utility spell, not so great in the dungeon. Although, yes, I know there are uses where you can find for it. And as I get more spells, that certainly might be one that I would take, but not right now. Cure Light Wounds. There's no reason not to take Cure Light Wounds. Or, as my group used to call them, Kaluas. Detect Evil. Very useful, but low levels will let people's actions determine if they're evil or not. Detect Magic, also useful. Hopefully we have a spellcaster who can cast it. Light, useful in a pinch, but if we don't have torches and lanterns, then that's on us right now. Protection from one of the things of light, though, is often used as an attack spell to cast in somebody's eyes to blind them. Different dungeon masters that I've known of had different feelings about that. Some of them had no problem with it. Some of them said it had to be on an object, so in front of a person's eyes wasn't cool. Although casting it on somebody's helmet is fair game, I think. Protection from evil, useful spell for keeping out mental possession and giving you a benefit against creatures that just want to rip you up. It also keeps out creatures from other planes, which is very useful. Purify food and drink, another wonderful utility spell. Also good for getting rid of poisons. Remove fear, situationally useful. Not something I would have as my go-to spell, unless I know that I'm fighting creatures that cause fear a lot. Resist cold has its usefulness, certainly, if you're going to be in cold environments or you think that you're going to face things like winter wolves and white dragons. That's a fine spell. But in general utility, not so much. Sanctuary is a wonderful spell for somebody who's just going to sit back and heal. And actually, overall, that's not a bad one for my character to have. In this version, you can't just sacrifice out your spells to power some healing abilities. You have to be very careful and choose the exact spells you need. I can learn Cure Light Wounds twice. Sanctuary means that the enemies can't attack you unless you attack them first. For a healer, that could be very, very, very useful. It also helps your control fighters keep the focus on them, because if your enemies can't have you as an option, then they have to consider that fighter who's killing them much more so than you. Of course, clerics or wizards have the majority of the spells in the list, but still good to quickly look through and make sure that I'm remembering these spells correctly. It has been a little while. Sanctuary, when the cleric casts a spell, an opponent has to make saving throws. Any opponents must make saving throws to attack them. Saving throws versus magic are really tough at low levels. So they will completely ignore the cleric protected by the spell. If they make the saving throw, they can still attack. I'm going to take Sanctuary. I was going to take Bless, but I think Sanctuary could be more useful. Now remember, in OD&D and basic D&D, first level clerics didn't get any spells at all. I went from having no spells to 3 spells. That's a pretty big change. And the understanding is that you want your characters to be cool on the ground running. Yes, you're not superheroes able to take on dragons at first level, but at the same time you're also not unduly hampered by your choices. Lets you be effective in your chosen profession right away, which is a difference in focus. It makes this character much more attractive. This is actually a fairly strong character. It would be useful to any party. His healing would be welcome in any group. I can, in a pinch, help out in other ways too, like in combat. So, yeah, this I don't feel bad about Brother Adolphus here. He could do well. Of course, he's not going to have the attachment of ridiculous stats. Instead, I just have to rely on good sense and being a good teammate. Alright, then, well, we have almost everything done on here. Your saving throws are all on a matrix, again, so, and I have no bonuses or penalties, so it would all go off of the matrix, which is on the Game Master's screen, or Dungeon Master's screen. We are playing D&D after all. Then we look and we find out that clerics roll 3d6 for their gold to start with, to equip themselves. And I have dyslexia and can't hit the table, it seems. Okay, so I rolled a 5, a 5, and a 3, so 130 gold. We'll pull out my handy-dandy piece of scratch paper for that. 130 gold is substantial for a commoner, but as far as an adventurer, that will go quick. Plate mail, for instance, is 400 gold pieces, so I can't afford the best. So I have to make allowances. I can have any other piece of armor, though, even banded mail or splinted mail. It falls within what I can afford. My weapons aren't going to be overly expensive. So alternatively, I could go cheap, get something like scale mail, which is not very expensive. Doesn't protect very well. Scale mail and shield, however, would give me 5 armor class, which isn't terrible. And I could then, buy all of those support items that would really help out the group. Buy extra torches, buy the length of rope with the grappling hook, and, something that the more impoverished members of the group might themselves want. But in this case, I'm buying to give my character as much survivability as possible. For a cleric, that means getting good armor. In this case, I think we're going to go with banded mail. It's 90 gold. Yeah. We'll go with banded mail. So that leaves us with 40. And banded mail. And we're going to go with a small wooden shield for 1 gold. Now, a small wooden shield will give me a bonus to armor class against 1 opponent. So if I'm fighting somebody mano a mano, it'll give me a bonus. This is important for my character to be on the flank of the group. If I'm surrounded, it's not going to give me a great deal of protection. But my armor is quite good. This will actually drop me down to a 3 armor class? Yeah, a 3 armor class against an opponent that I'm going one-on-one with, and a 4 armor class otherwise. So So my armor is either a 4/3. Good to know. And combat adjustments, defensive adjustments. No dexterity. No, none of that. Alright, colors, maybe, hit points gained per level, 6 hit points. Again, I like having this box here that gives hit points gained per level, so if you lose a level, you can lose the amount of hit points that you would have gotten for that level. That's actually kind of cool. Alright, so that's our armor class. We've got 39 gold left. We will want a footman's mace. A footman's mace is a large, heavy, bludgeoning object. It's nothing beautiful about it. On the upside, it is relatively cheap at just 8 gold pieces. And I guess we'll also get a sling and a dozen bullets. So, tell you what, we'll get a sling and a dozen bullets, and then 2 score of bullets. 20 silver pieces is a gold. Actually, the dozen bullets will do for now. So that'll leave us with a quarter of a gold piece left. 30 and a quarter for a sling with 12 bullets. If I have another gold lying around, I'll get a whole bunch of sling bullets, which would be fine. You can also pick up stones and use them too. There's actually statistics for that. And yeah. Okay, so we have 30 and a half. Clothes, generally in my experience, usually we've had where you just spend 3 gold, you get clothes. So that would leave us with 27 and a quarter for clothes that you would wear. Don't need herbs. Don't need livestock. Don't need a horse at this time. We're going to assume that we can just walk to the dungeon. Leather backpack. $2 gold. So 25 and a quarter. Large iron box, candles, wax candles, or tallow candles. We'll take tallow candles are a copper piece, which is 1/100th of a gold, I believe. 10 copper pieces, no, it's 1/200th of a gold. Gosh, gotta love that. So we can get 50 tallow candles. And that'll take care of that quarter gold we've got lying around. These are going to be like your small little tiny votive candles. Just enough to provide some light, maybe light something on fire. Scroll cases down the road. A bullseye lantern or a hooded lantern, that's down the road. We're going to get torches. We'll get 5 torches. That's a copper piece each. Might as well get 10 torches. So that would be basically a silver worth. So we're down to 24 and 9 silver. Yay. A tinderbox is worth a gold. Gotta have a tinderbox. Tinderbox contains the things that you need to light things on fire. It has flint and steel to strike sparks. It has kindling. It has some dried up moss to catch the flame. Yes, you can start fires reliably with a tinderbox. It's also it's considered to be sealed against the elements so that things inside stay viable even if you get rained on and such. Iron spikes. We'll take 10 iron spikes. they're pokey, but they're really there to, let's see, it's 20, iron spikes are 1 copper, so we're taking 10, so we're down to 23 gold and 8 silver. I use them for spiking doors or drilling into a wall to make foot, so that you can put your foot on to climb walls. It's good if you don't have a rogue around. You can use them to leverage yourself up. Water skins. And yeah, we'll take a water skin. $15 silver. So that'll leave us with 22. And oh, that's 18 silver. That's right, because that's 200 gold. Or 200 coppers make 1. So we have, at 15, we have 23 and 3 silver pieces left. Sacks. We need some sacks. We'll take small sacks, 10 small sacks. That leaves us with 22 and 13 silver. Okay. 10 feet of rope is 4 silver pieces. 22, how many? 4 silver? 9 silver. 50 feet of rope. Okay, this is going to start getting heavy. Our character is not extremely strong here. So, something to take into account. 21 and 9 silver for a large belt pouch. And my group also had 5 gold pieces, could get you a spell component pouch with different compartments and things. I'm going to take that from my past for a spell component pouch, because some clerical spells do require an odd component or two. Mostly your holy symbol, though. Speaking of which, let's go down to religious items. Holy symbol iron is 2 gold. A holy symbol of silver is 50 gold. We will be going with an iron holy symbol. And that is 2 gold, so we're at 14 gold, 9 silver. A wooden holy symbol would be 7 silver, but that's low class. Some prayer beads. 1 gold, so that's 13 gold, 9 silver left. And I suppose we should have the obligatory 1 week of iron rations. Okay, we have light, we have transportation, we have food, we have a skin for drink. We are pretty well set. Anything else would probably be something we would need to handle on a case-by-case basis. And with 8 gold, 9 silver pieces left, we have a little bit of wiggle room to buy more gear as we need. So, that being said, we're going to transfer all of this gear and everything and write out the specs on this character sheet with just a little bit of video magic. Alright, really quickly, we finished our character. It didn't take very much, just copying down the gear that we purchased from our scratch piece of paper. And the treasure we have left, the 8 gold and 9 silver left for spending money. And then we also filled out our weapons that we have and their statistics. The footman's mace requires 4 feet of room to swing. It's got a speed factor of 7, not a very fast weapon, naturally. And for the most part, there's not going to be a lot of penalties based on armor of anybody that we're hitting. It's a little easier to hit somebody who is, or a little harder to hit somebody who's not wearing armor. They can dance around your mace. But a person in plate mail is actually easier to hit because that's what maces were designed for, is crush the person underneath armor. The sling can hit an unarmored target a fair amount easier, but it does have some penalties at the top end for hitting armored foes that are going to be protected from sling bullets. That is something that, again, weapon adjustments are something not every group uses. I find them cumbersome, but I'm doing the character as the rules dictate. Damage. The mace does 1d6 plus 1 against small and medium targets, and 1d6 against larger targets. Interestingly enough, the sling at range against large targets does more damage, 1d6 plus 1 using bullets, and 1d4 plus 1 to small and medium targets. It does 1d4 against either target if you're just throwing stones. So that is the last of the additions we need to do to have a finished character. So let's discuss this, shall we? So there you have it. We have a finished character, after not a great deal of effort either. With a game system enabling you a lot of control, a number of ways of rolling up the character, a wider range of character classes than we've seen before in OD&D and basic D&D, several choices for races. You have a lot of customization for how detailed your character gets. Your characters also have a wider range of powers. You have, from OD&D, you have weapons that do different types of damage. You also have gone a little bit more detailed into weapon adjustments so that different weapons do better against particular kinds of armor. Something that would have warmed the cockles of the heart of old wargamers who want exactitude and the advantages of having different weapons over certain types of opponents. That can lead to warriors carrying a golf bag full of different weapons so that you can size up an opponent and get the advantage against them for whatever they're wearing. If you use that. There are a lot of rules in AD&D that were considered optional by some groups, including things like the level restrictions by race. Not everybody used those. Some of the experience rewards that you could get, getting experience for gold, for example, were modified heavily by people. As well as the individual monsters themselves, house rules were abundant and were encouraged in the time. But this little sampling of what we did shows how to make a basic character. There's a lot to consider. First of all, you have more classes and races, so shopping for different abilities becomes useful. To have so many different choices. If you just simply let the dice roll as they may and to decide your character, well, you can still get a good range of choices and abilities, but we're moving farther away from that, and conceptualizing a character and making that character becomes more possible and possibly more desired for some people. Now, we made a cleric who is a fairly need-light character. We just picked out a couple of spells and nothing too extraordinary. We did get a sampling of picking out the gear, choosing your armor, choosing weapons. So that shows that element. We didn't go into some of the more esoteric classes. The monk, for instance. Monks are difficult to keep alive because they have a lot of restrictions. At low level, they don't have a lot of hit points, and their armor class is not very good. Towards the end of the game, though, they can be amazing, dealing out ridiculous amounts of damage with bare hands, lots of supernatural abilities, incredible speed. But again, you kind of need good stats to keep a character like that alive and viable. In my mind, especially dexterity you need, because you should be relying on range attacks as much as possible at low levels, just so you can stay out of harm's way to get a chance to survive. Our character is pretty viable. The biggest challenge, of course, with that is he's not overwhelmingly powerful. He's not going to look at goblins and orcs and laugh at them. Even lower level creatures, almost anything is on the board as a challenge. So with the right group, he will fit in nicely, especially if there are people who can protect him and keep him upright. The spell selection is fairly similar to what was available through OD&D's opening. Many of the spells were carried up. The simplified spell lists of basic D&D, of course, have been expanded upon quite heavily for this set. But for clerics, it's easier. For magic users, you have a much bigger buffet to sort through. The expectation is that your character is going to try to fill your spellbook with as many spells as possible, so that becomes an interesting aspect of the gameplay. As far as the different races, limitations, but special abilities. We got used to that in OD&D and basic D&D, having things like dark vision, awfully handy. This is balanced, of course, by level restrictions primarily. The idea that And this is one thing that didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of players and some game masters, is that if elves live for hundreds of years, how is it that they can only get to at most 11 levels of magic user? And we'll have to watch humans become archmages while their eldest, most experienced, and most intelligent of wizards can't cast the highest levels of magic. And yet, in a lot of game worlds, elven artifacts are all over the place and have, spell effects that are even more powerful yet. It's kind of strange, but it's all down to conventions and balancing to make the game fair. For all those special abilities that elves and dwarves get, the limitation is that their ambition is capped because they don't absorb the mastery as much as humans in their short lifespans glom onto, and drive that consumes them to master things in excess of the longer-lived races. It's an interesting premise, and it's a convention that I'm not utterly against. I can understand the need. However, it's not a coincidence that those things have been removed in later editions. It can chafe against people who don't like to feel limited. Early on in Dungeons and Dragons, the idea of making characters that were extraordinarily high level was not something that was considered heavily. Quite often, the idea of retiring your character once they hit a name level, or roughly 9th, 10th level, it was time to get another character, play another one, and have at it at another dungeon, or try to delve and exceed that character in the same dungeon. I've had this related to me by several people who were in TSR in the industry, and that was their experience. But this new style of play where you have higher level characters doing epic questing and all kinds of things, the approach of Overland being just as significant in cases as the dungeon itself, the addition of world books like the Greyhawk and Blackmoor worlds, where you could have a tight and unified world that you can go into and still relate to other people playing in that same world. These are all expansions and outgrowth and developed heavily in the first edition, a task which continued on into the second edition while it was still run by TSR. As far as what we've learned from making characters, though, doing so is still a relatively simple process. It's not drastically more complicated than it was for OD&D or even basic D&D. You have more choices, yes, but once you've made your decisions, there's really not a lot of extra work that you have to do, especially with the reliance on matrices and charts. You don't have to worry about your particular saving throws, for instance, because that's all going to be outlined on a matrix, often on the Game Master's screen, or Dungeon Master's screen if you're using one. The hit-to-hit tables, likewise, are all accessed by matrix. You have bonuses, certainly, but that is one of the things about the game. It was all about rolling and checking your result. Later on, as we'll find out in the second edition, that becomes less important. The charts are there to give you information so you can update your character sheet so that you can know the numbers that you will need. And after that, we get introduced to a strange bird called Thaco. Strange sound, but if you learned how to play in that time, you become very familiar with it. It's a solid, robust game system, though. First edition, it has a kind of an arcane charm to it. And if you've ever read any of the first edition books, you know what I'm talking about. The style of writing, often attributed to Gary Gygax, the faceplate of TSR at the time, and with his name on all of the books, he had a very highly educated style of writing, which froze out people who don't appreciate high language and the $10 words when a couple of 2-bit words would do. But that was the style that he chose to write in, which probably didn't hurt the reputation that this game was for the intelligentsia, the college kids who threw themselves into the game, and people who could absorb complicated concepts. Realistically, if you have somebody to explain the game for you, Coming into it from outside, it's not terribly complicated. It's roll a die and look at a chart. Roll a die, look at a chart. It's really fairly basic. But the reading can be nigh impenetrable if you're not used to reading that kind of thing. So the arcane-seeming style of first edition was preserved in that way. When later editions came out, they were written with a much more friendly and including atmosphere, which, second edition really moved toward. Also, just looking through the book, as I demonstrated, the book was packed full of information. An explosion of rules and new concepts and conceits for the game. Not a ton of art, mind you, and the art that was there was, fairly crude, certainly by today's standards, crude. However, that was something that was also going to be shown in the changing of the editions. But as far as what I've just shown with this character witness, making characters was not terribly complicated. You had a range of different choices, enough to make, for most part, a character that could fit almost anything you could conceptualize from fantasy adventure. You could find something that would fit in Dungeons and Dragons. It embraced a wide range of different concepts and conceits, including some which were unique for this game. As far as, the charm of it all and, some of the clunkiness, sure. There is certainly some things that people chose to weed out to make the game easier to play, or there were aspects that were added to, increase the enjoyment people had. But all in all, AD&D, still a viable game system, still a lot of fun. I'm Rob, and this has been my Character Witness. Thank you very much, and I hope you get many, many more rolls of the die that were more lucky than some of mine were. Farewell.